You're listening to the Word Slinger Podcast, episode 45, Writing for Comics and Novels with Jonathan Maberry. And I'm here to help.
If you would like to support this program, or any of Kevin Tomlinson's work, then we invite you to become a reader. Find fiction you will love at kevintomlinson.com/books.
It's the Word Slinger Podcast, where story matters. Build your brand, write your book, redefine who you are. It's all about the story here. What's yours? Now, here's the guy who invented Pants Optional, Kevin Tomlinson, the Word Slinger.
Word Slinger.
Hey everybody, this is Kevin Tomlinson, the Word Slinger. Thank you so much for tuning in again. I love spending this time with you guys each week. This really is kind of a highlight of my week on most weeks. And there are those times when things are difficult. This is actually, this is true confession time, because we don't hide anything on the Word Slinger show. But my true confession is, this is about the 5th time I've started this intro this morning. And largely because, I'm having some of my typical, allergy and throat issues that have caused me some grief this morning. But above and beyond that, I don't know. I wasn't feeling it. I just wasn't grooving to some of what I was telling you earlier. You didn't miss out on anything. Let's just put it that way. What I was wanting to announce, I'm reading a book right now that I think you might find interesting. It's called The One Thing. It's written by Gary W. Keller and Jay Papasan. It was recommended to me by a former guest on the show. And it's really helped kind of shape my perspective on my writing career. Some of what I'm doing, with the author career, we'll say. It was recommended, by the way, by Jeff Woods. He was on episode 38, Finding Mentors with Jeff Woods. You should definitely check that episode out at wordslingerpodcast.com. But the big takeaway for me right now from that book was the definition of priority, because we've sort of muddied the waters with that definition, because it was always meant to be singular, never plural, but we make it plural. You have a priority, you have the most important thing. And what we do is we say things like, that is my top priority on a list of priorities. That's one of my biggest priorities. I'm setting my priorities straight, that sort of thing. You say those phrases, and what you're doing is you're giving a whole bunch of things equal weight with what's supposed to be the most important thing. And I realized recently that, though my writing has always been important to me, I've never made it the priority, because I'm always looking for things that I can do that will help support me so that I can be an author full time. And if I'd spent even a tenth of that energy focused on being an author full time, I probably would be much further ahead. So, lesson learned. It's not the first time I've learned this lesson. It probably won't be the last time I've learned this lesson. So I have to keep reminding myself. It's good to come across books like this every now and then, because they help you reassess. And that's why you read. That's why you read nonfiction and listen to podcasts. And, you're looking for mentors. And you can find those mentors in books and podcasts and, videos on YouTube and that sort of thing. You can find people who are doing what you want to do, learn how they're doing it, and then repeat what they're doing to get the same results. I believe that. It works. I've seen it. I've done it. It does work. So it's good to reset every now and then. So all that aside, that's part of Kevin's growth process. And I'm working with we'll call him a consultant. Let's call him a marketing mentor. I'm working with somebody right now. We've just been talking about better ways for me to market my work, and he's helping me out. We've formed a sort of partnership. So one of the things that he has me doing is writing some prequel shorts for Citadel. So if you're a fan of the Citadel series, my Citadel trilogy, get ready. I'm about to release soonish, we're going to start releasing some short stories that I think you'll be excited about. So, anyway, that wasn't what I wanted to start with per se, but I'm glad we kind of got through that. I'll talk a bit more about that and sort of the RV lifestyle stuff that's been going on with me and my wife after the interview. But for now, let's stop all that yammering. Let's get to the really important stuff, because I'm talking to Jonathan Maberry. Now, he's a New York Times best-selling author, but he's also a comic book writer. And honestly, that's no, not to downplay the New York Times best-selling author bit, because I'm excited about that too. But I'm thrilled to talk to somebody who's actually in the world of writing comics, because that's on my bucket list. I actually do want to write for comics. I want to write for Marvel Comics specifically, because I'm a Marvel Comics guy. Grew up in that world, so it was really interesting to get his sort of story on how he got into that. And learn a little more about the world of comic writing, but also the world of being a New York Times bestselling author. It's really interesting. So check him out in this interview coming up. I think you'll enjoy it, and stick around afterwards if you don't mind. I'll do the wrap up, and we'll talk a little more about what's going on in Wordslinger land. If you don't have a lot of time, at least listen to the interview. So, all right, take care. I'll see you after the interview, and enjoy. Hey, everybody. Now, today I'm talking to somebody I follow with great interest, actually, because I'm such a fan of, I'm a fan of comic books in general, so this guy has come on my radar often, and that is New York Times bestselling author and comic book writer Jonathan Maberry. Jonathan, thanks so much for taking the time to be with me on the show, man.
Oh, happy to be here, Kevin.
So, comic book writing is the thing I talk to a lot of authors, and I talk to a lot of indie authors in particular, but I don't get to talk to a whole lot of comic book writers. I did talk to a game writer recently, but I'm very interested in that as a field. It's one of the things that's sort of on my bucket list to one day pen a comic. But so tell me a little about how you got into that line of work.
Well, I actually got into it because of my novels. I've always been a novelist. Put it this way, in my professional career, where my name has actually gotten out there, it's through my novels.
Yeah.
And I'd been a long-time comic book fan, though, and I was strategizing with my agent how to get on the radar of Marvel, because I was a Marvel guy.
Right, me too.
And before we had even gotten a pitch written, I get a phone call from Axel Alonso, who is the editor-in-chief of Marvel. He had picked up my novel Patient Zero and read it on a plane flying cross country. And when he got back to New York, he looked me up, called me out of the blue, and asked me if I'd possibly be interested in writing for Marvel.
Wow. That's fantastic.
Yeah, really unexpected, absolutely delightful. And as it turns out, yes, I did, in fact, want to write for Marvel. We chatted for a long time, and we came up with a couple of projects that he thought would be good trial runs for me. He gave me a Wolverine 8-page short, and based on the strength of that script, he immediately gave me a 32-page Punisher Max, which is their Marvel adult line, and those were my first two comics.
I think that's actually where I first encountered you, was on Punisher Max. So. Kudos. That's a violent book to start on. Do you consider yourself sort of do you consider your work to be violent in, overall, in general?
Well, violence isn't the point of my work, which, by the way, is an important thing to mention. A lot of folks, in my field, I write comics, I write novels. I'm a former martial arts instructor, former bodyguard. Yeah. So people assume that I love the violence. I actually don't. Yeah. It's kind of the same take as my view of monsters. People ask me, why do you write about monsters? I don't. I write about people who fight monsters.
Right.
Violence is an element of my stories because it is one of the ways, not certainly the preferred way, but one of the ways in which the good guys get to win.
Yeah.
And superhero comics aren't about having meaningful discussions over latte.
True enough, yeah.
So, I have an interest in the fight against human trafficking. So I wrote a story about human trafficking, and the Punisher, who's insane, but he's a good guy, takes it amiss when he comes up against a group that does kiddie porn and snuff porn and human trafficking.
Yeah.
So it is not a passive response to that. So yeah, the comic is violent, but I'm a fairly non-violent person.
Right. But I think anybody coming across that particular combination of crimes might go all Punisher and Frank Castle and the whole thing, right?
Well, that's one of the things about these types of books. They allow us to vent in a way that's safe. I mean, we get to play out our desires. I mean, we may be passive people in a lot of ways. We may want peace, but there are times we want to see the bad guys get spanked hard.
Yes. Yeah.
And the Punisher, I mean, nobody goes after bad guys quite as aggressively as the Punisher, because everyone he goes after dies.
Yeah.
So, it's the ultimate extension of our will for hard justice. And it's somewhat indefensible in conversation, but, we tend to read comics alone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I've been a comics reader for my whole life. I mean, I remember my first comic book came to me when I got sick when I was like, I don't know, 6. And I've been stuck in that world ever since, I guess. So, tell me a little about that first comic script experience, though. Like, you came in as a novelist, but you didn't necessarily know how to write or format a comic book, right? Did you already have that?
I didn't, and I'm one of those writers that I will try just about anything.
Yeah.
I've written so many different types of things. I've written and sold poetry and plays, greeting cards, and all sorts of stuff. So when a challenge comes up, if somebody says you want to do this, my answer is usually yes, and then I have to figure it out.
Yeah.
With comics, he said he would send me some scripts, but I was so excited. I went out that day and just went to back when Borders was still open, went to Borders because they had a comic book rack, got a bunch of comics, sat down at a table with coffee, and deconstructed the comics. I essentially took one of the comics I enjoyed reading, reverse engineered it by seeing if I could come up with a script that would have resulted in that comic.
Nice.
And the comic in question happened to be a Moon Knight comic that was out at the time. And I deconstructed it, and I did the same thing with a Wolverine comic because I knew I was going to do that character. Later on, I was able to share those scripts with a couple of folks, including the writers of those individual issues, and they were moderately close.
Yeah.
So reverse engineering something is in terms of how to write, is something writers do. I mean, we look at a structure and we say, okay, what's the form? What are the tools of craft that make that a thing? And then when you see how they do it, you kind of study the carpentry, so to speak.
Yeah.
You can then add those tools to your toolbox and try to approach it with the same level of craft, as long as you're then not trying to imitate the style of the individual writer. That's kind of a danger zone. And when you imitate craft or learn from craft, you have to make sure that it's your own style.
Yeah. Yeah. I see that in the novel writing world too. I mean, I do a little bit of author coaching, so a lot of the people who come to me because they love, like, say, Stephen King or something along those lines, and so they tend to want to imitate. So it's hard to find that voice. How did you find your voice in this work?
Well, luckily, I'm a writer, so I could do. It's not my first rodeo, so I've written. By the time that came along, I was probably working on my 5th or 6th novel.
Yeah.
Patient Zero had come out, which would have been 2009. So I was probably either writing. I think I was writing the Wolfman novelization.
Yeah.
And around the same time, I would have started or just finished the second Joe Ledger book. So I was already writing, and I was used to finding what my voice is and experimenting with different openings of novels and so on to find out what my voice is. And I was doing a lot of short stories.
Yeah.
So I had become comfortable with who I was as a writer, and also with the technique of finding the voice to tell an individual story. The challenge then was to fold into my voice the character as established by other writers in comics.
Right.
That was actually harder than finding the voice to write the comic. It was making sure that I paid proper homage to the writers who had gone before me, and also to the readers who expected a certain thing of that character.
Yeah. So, okay, you said you were a Marvel guy. What were Wolverine and Punisher kind of your characters of choice, or?
Not really. I mean, they would not have been the comics I would have asked to write.
Yeah.
These were assigned to me. I started with Marvel back in 19, I guess it was 65, maybe somewhere in there. I bought Fantastic Four number 66.
Mhm.
It was the first comic I ever bought. What Lurks Behind the Beehive?
Yes.
And it was the introduction of the character Him, who would go on to become Adam Warlock, one of my favorites.
Right.
If I had been given a chance to write any characters, it would have probably been a Fantastic Four comic, which I more or less wrote later on with Doom War.
Yeah.
Or Captain America or a Black Panther. And luckily I got to write all of those characters after a while. But those were the ones I probably wanted to start with.
Yeah.
I did make one suggestion for a character, and I got it halfway out before the editor said, Frax Alonso said, every novelist I've ever talked to has wanted to do a Doctor Strange comic, and our answer is no, 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 no. Doctor Strange will always be a supporting character. Of course, now they're doing a movie with Benedict Cumberbatch.
Exactly.
But that shit failed, so.
Yeah, well, yeah, them's the breaks, right? So, how is writing for comics? How does it differ from writing for novels? I mean, other than some of the obvious ways, like being able to write in prose. I mean,
Well, part of it is it's a teamwork thing.
Okay.
A novel, it's you and your laptop for months at a time. And you don't even get feedback or anything else until the work is turned in, and then you get maybe notes from your editor, maybe from your agent, and then you revise and you're done.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas comics, you discuss from the very beginning, you discuss your pitch with the editor. The editor is very, very hands-on in comics. Probably the editor in comics is very, very close to the producer in music, and they're there at every stage of this. And my editor for my first comic was in fact Axel Alonso, so I was working with the editor-in-chief there.
Nice.
And it was good schooling too. And then you had, after you write your pitch, when it gets approved, you have to write what's called a beat sheet, which lays out which story beats are going to be on the pages, filling out what was then a 22-page comic. Mm-hmm. Comics are now moved to 20 pages, and you lay out the beats, and then you get feedback on that, and then the artist is brought in, and you discuss some things with the artist. Then you write your script. You get feedback from the editor on the script, and then you get pencil sketches from the artist, and the artist doesn't necessarily always do what you want them to do. Now, this, by the way, is a good thing. My strong suit is telling, visually driven prose.
Right.
Comics are visual art with that's built around the prose. So even though I write the script and decide how many panels and tell them what art I want in each panel, it's the artist's job, their A game, to then interpret that and tell the story using visuals. At first, my first drafts of comics were very wordy because I wanted the words to drive the story. Yeah. I learned that you need to put all of those words into art direction, so the artists tells more of the story with visuals, so that you can have fewer words in the panel and don't crowd the art out.
Right.
And that was a learning curve. But so you get the editor's input, the artist's input. You also get the colorist's input. I've worked with some great colorists. I did several projects with Lee Lockridge or could be Lockridge. I'm not sure how his name is pronounced at Marvel, who does very cinematic coloring. And I know for a fact that his coloring brought the level of quality, of visual presentation up quite a lot.
Right.
So you listen to them too, and then sometimes the letterist jumps in. So all of these are people who have say in the comic, and if you're smart, you listen. Right. You don't try to be a prima donna. You don't try to make it me, me, me. It is a true team effort, and when you work with a team, you create a much better comic.
Yeah, I could see that, and I know how collaborative that process is. I mean, I've worked in film and television. It's very much the same there. So I think it was a difficult transition, though, to go from, you're sitting at your laptop, you've got complete control over what you're writing. Was it difficult to go to that team environment?
Well, it was a learning curve, but I didn't find it difficult. Here's why. I'm not a prima donna, and I'm not a control freak. Okay. And there are two qualities I think are as important as my ability to write. and there's backstory to this. When I was a kid, when I went to John Paul Jones Junior High School in Philadelphia, which was a school that had the lowest academic standard in the entire city, which is saying a lot for Philly. I grew up there, so I can make that statement. I wound up being put into the library for 3 years of independent study because I was turning in any homework at all, I was ruining the curve for the other kids. So I was in the library for 3 years, and the golden part about that, other than the fact that I was surrounded by books, was that the librarian was the secretary for 2 different clubs of professional writers. So she would bring me along to their meetings. I got to meet and get to know pretty well over a course of 3 years Ray Bradbury and Richard Matheson, among others. Yeah, I mean, how lucky am I? You know,
No
I'm a poor kid from Philadelphia, and I'm meeting 2 of the kings. You know,
Yes.
and once they realized that I actually wanted to write for a living, they took a lot of time to tell me important things about the craft and the business, and they both shared information about how to be a good writer. A good writing professional, I should say.
Yeah.
Matheson's thing, Bradbury's thing was writers should always help other writers, which means that you shouldn't make it all about you. You should help your fellow writers without putting a price tag on it, without giving them a marker that you can call. Just help. And Matheson, his view was, his 10 commandments, and they're great 10 commandments. Commandment 1, do not be a jackass. Commandment 2, see Commandment 1.
Right.
And commandments 3 through 10 are don't be a jackass, said louder. So their whole take was you get along in this business if you really accept the truth that good guys finish first, not last.
Yeah.
And it was great advice, and it colored my entire professional life. And I was only 12, 13, and 14 at the time. But when I got into writing professionally, my whole thing was, what can we do and have fun, rather than how can this serve my needs?
Yeah.
So getting back, when I got into comics, I was quite willing to accept to work with the group dynamic, because I knew that's what made a better comic.
Yeah.
And my whole thing is I wanted to write really good comics. So it wasn't difficult. There was a learning curve, but it wasn't painful in any way.
Right. I'm still sort of floored by the fact that you knew Matheson and Ray Bradbury.
I will never forget how lucky I was.
Oh no, yeah, no kidding. So I feel kind of honored by proxy, just now that you and I know each other. So tell me about. Okay, so how did you? Clearly, you had a great introduction to the world of writing. So what was that first book experience like? How did you manage to land a book deal?
Well, that comes in 2 phases, because I was a nonfiction writer for 25 years before I turned to fiction.
Okay.
Magazine features, and then in 1990, I wrote my first nonfiction book. It was a college textbook. I wrote a whole bunch of textbooks when I was teaching at Temple University. Mm-hmm. The first book I published was Judo and You, which is basically the rules and techniques of judo.
That's cool.
And I wrote it for a friend of mine who was teaching the judo class. And I wrote, my second one was Introduction to Asian Martial Arts, which was pretty much what that sounded. I was teaching martial arts history. Yeah. So those were all college textbooks, didn't need to go through the agent process or any of that. Roll forward to the 2000s, when I decided I wanted to try my hand at a novel. I went out and did my homework and found a way to find an agent. And it was, it's a way that was teachable. Other people have used the same method to find a really good agent. And hold on, sorry, my phone is ringing. I want to put it in my desk. Sorry. Yeah, it's the house phone. I never figured out how to turn the damn thing off. Anyway, so what I did is I wound up.
You have a very persistent phone.
Yeah, and it's a telemarketer too. How do you? Lower the volume. That'll work. Okay, sorry about that.
No problem.
Digital age, I got too many things that ring, beep, and buzz around me all the time.
Yeah.
So after I got my agent, I worked with her to build a list of where I wanted this book to go and what kind of market. I was very hands-on in the process of building the fiction side of my career.
Yeah.
And I made a list of publishers I thought would want it, and she made a list. Turns out her list was better because that's her job.
Yeah.
And but we sent it to all of them, and we got a couple of offers. And Pinnacle Books was the one that made the best offer because they wanted all three. I wrote a trilogy, wrote the first book of a trilogy, and they bought all three.
Wow.
And that's what got me started. And since then, we've moved from company to company looking for better deals, which we've been getting. And because I shift genre all the time, I don't like writing in one genre. I like writing the best book I can, and then we sell it.
Yeah.
And last week we sold my 34th and 35th novel. I've written 25 since 2005, but we've got about almost 10 that are sold that I haven't written yet.
So have you found that writing multi-genre hurts at all, or does it matter?
Sure as heck doesn't seem to hurt,
Not you, anyway, right?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it is, this is something that Matheson told me. He said, don't pigeonhole yourself. Write your best work and find a way to sell it. Be smart about business, but don't believe a lot of the propaganda. And one of the propagandized things that you hear so often is that, writers need to stay in one genre, need to brand yourself in one genre, et cetera. And that's not true. Stephen King is a great example. People think he's a horror writer. He's actually only a horror writer some of the time.
Yeah.
A big chunk of his fiction, It, for example, is not horror. It's science fiction. It's been an alien spider.
Yeah.
Firestarter science fiction. The Dark Towers is epic fantasy. Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon is YA. He's all over the place. So was Dean Koontz. So was Richard Matheson. No two of his books would be on the same shelf.
Yeah, that's true.
What Dreams May Come and The Shrinking Man, hardly the same genre.
Yeah.
So that's what I've done. And as a result, not only can I write in ways that keep me from ever getting bored, but I can have multiple books coming out in a year because they're not competing against one another.
Yeah, that's an interesting take on that. I hadn't actually considered that. I'm going to start giving that advice to people.
Yeah, and as a result, I went from being a poor guy in Philadelphia who had to borrow money to even go to my first awards banquet back in 2006.
Yeah.
To someone I'm sitting here in my condo in Del Mar looking at the Pacific Ocean and the blue whales migrating past the house.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Yeah, writing multiple genres and having a good work ethic and not being a jackass. Yes, good guys can
it pays off.
It really
Okay,
does.
so later, when I listen back to this entire interview, I'm going to highlight and memorize everything you just said about not being a jackass.
Important safety tip, kids.
Yeah, exactly. You too can do this, kids. So, what was that? You want to? Are you willing to share that secret recipe you had for getting an agent?
Oh, sure. First off, I got to understand that I asked for advice from people, and I got the same advice from about 10 people who had agents, and I thought it was insanely bad advice. They said, a new writer, somebody who's never been published in fiction before, and my nonfiction credits for college textbooks, by the way, do not transfer over to fiction advantage. They said only look for a low-level agent because they're the only ones who are, somebody new into the business because they're the only ones willing to take a shot on a new writer. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow, that's particularly bad advice. It's just bad business advice. So, because by that viewpoint, what I would say, my brand as an author would be, I'm mediocre, damn it, and I intend to stay that way.
Good point.
And that's horrible business advice.
Yeah.
You don't advertise a car by saying it's okay.
Yeah.
That's not a brand. Now, I don't know. This is my first novel. I don't know whether the book is going to be well received. I don't know whether it's going to be a hit or a failure. All I know is I believed in it. My agent believed in it, or hopefully my agent will believe in it if she's going to hire me or take me on. I don't want to apologize in advance for my work. I have no proof that my work is bad or mediocre. So what I did is I researched. My first novel, Ghost Road Blues, was a suburban gothic or a rural gothic, a horror novel set in a small American town, in this case in Pennsylvania. So I looked for authors who had successfully published books in that genre. Stephen King's Salem's Lot comes to mind. Peter Straub's Ghost Story and Robert McCammon's They Thirst and Mystery Walk. And there's a few others. So I reached out or I researched who represented those people. I found out that Stephen King was represented by a lawyer, not an agent. And I found out who was agenting the others. What I mostly used was publishersmarketplace.com. Not Publishers Market, or Writers Market, publishersmarketplace.com. It's the only pay website that I think is of real value to writers. It gives you access to deal listings going back to, I think, 2000 of almost every deal in publishing. And each listing tells you the name of the agent who represented it and the name of the editor who bought it.
Oh, nice.
And they're clickable links, and you can go through and see what their track record is. So I sent my query to the 10 top agents representing books that were in my genre. And I spent time writing one hell of a query. I spent days making sure my query was good. And by the way, I offer that query to a variation of it to anyone who ever wants to ask for it. They can go to my website, sign up for a newsletter, just ask me for it, and I'll send it to them.
Okay.
Because every writer should use it because it's a good piece of business material. And also, it's since been tweaked by my agent, about 10 other top agents, and a couple of dozen editors. So it's now the form that they want to see come across their desk.
Yeah.
It's not a love letter to your book. It's a statement about why your book's exciting and why it's going to appeal to an existing demographic. It's a business letter.
Yeah.
So I sent these 10 queries out. I got 6 go-aheads to turn in either partial or full manuscripts. Now, normally at this point, you wait, a month, 2 months, 5 months, the rest of your natural life, whatever it's going to be, for them to finally get back to you. And that's also a bad business call. Right. So about 10 days into it, I broke one of the rules they tell you in publishing, is I emailed each of the agents and said, look, I'm going to be up in New York next week. How about I swing by, take you out to lunch, and see if we can do business together? Didn't ask if they loved my book, because I'm pretty sure they hadn't read it by then. Didn't ask to talk about my book, just to see if we could do business together. It was very specifically considered wording. Yeah. Most people are willing, if they know it's a business conversation and not a worship session for somebody's new submitted manuscript, they're more willing to go out to lunch with you. And, that's what I did. I had to borrow money to do this. I had no money. I had to borrow money for train fare, borrow money to take them out to lunch. It was an investment. And by the third week, I was going up doing this once a week, I had crammed so well in each agent's background so that I could talk about their career and books represented by their agencies. I didn't once mention my book during lunch. And on the third trip, the agent from Trident Media, Sarah Crow, just snatched the check off the table near the end of lunch and said, "Oh, our clients don't pay," which was a great killer line. So
that's like something I would write.
Yeah, and I've since learned that she swiped it from some other agent who swiped it from some other agent, because just like writers share query letter formats, they share good deal closing lines.
Nice, yes.
And I landed her in 2005. She sold the book that year. It came out the following year, first book. And since then, between novels, graphic novels, short story collections in print, short story collections in audio, anthologies I'm editing, and other projects, it's been about 75 things she sold for me.
Yeah.
And we're making good money together and having a great business relationship, and I am very hands-on with it.
Yeah.
I'm not one of these people that waits until my agent writes me, nor would I accept an agent who doesn't stay in moderately close contact. So if you establish that pattern early on, they know that you are business savvy enough to want to be part of your own business.
Yeah.
Because it is a small business.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of people don't think of it that way, but it is a business.
It is definitely a small, and ask my accountant who does my taxes. It's definitely a small business, because that's the tax breaks we get are small business things.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I kind of miss the days when I could write off practically anything just because I was a writer, though.
Well, you can still write off quite a few.
There's quite a bit, yeah, but it's not like the old days where every time I bought a magazine, I could write it off. So that, and I like that you brought up that it's a business, because that's something that a lot of people overlook when they think about writing as a career. So what are some of the ways that you've structured your business? Like, how do you keep the business and administrative side running?
Well, I pay attention to what's going on in the business. I subscribe to the trades. I read Publishers Weekly. Mm-hmm. I read the Hollywood Reporter and Variety. I subscribe to the free newsletters from Publishers Weekly. which are really great individual newsletters about what's going on in the industry. And also, when you subscribe to Publishers Marketplace, you get Publishers Lunch Deluxe, which is a great newsletter. And I read what's going on in the industry. I talk to booksellers. I talk to my colleagues. I keep a dialogue going on all the time about what's going on. And I do a ton of social media to stay present with my fan base, my colleagues, the bloggers, and just people in that world. I devote, in fact, 10 minutes out of every hour to social media, every hour of my 8-hour writing day. So I'm always tapping back in, and that keeps the business going. Also, I pay attention to things like what are my costs, what's my profit, what's my margin, what are my plans down the road. What do I want to do as opposed to what would be something someone else might want me to do that might be a good idea. I make informed business decisions. I ask advice of people who know. I give advice when people ask me, and even when I get up in the morning, I get up with the thought of I'm going to work. So usually in the mornings I go out to a coffee shop because I like the idea of going to work. Mm-hmm. And then around lunchtime I come home to my home office where I'm currently sitting here watching the ocean, and that's the second half of my workday. So it is to me a business. But I also take off, when my workday is done, it's family time.
Yeah.
So you have to have that balance of what are you working for if it's not for the betterment, enrichment, joy of your family. So I make sure that's a major component.
Yeah, you are making the writer's life sound very attractive and possibly skewing some opinions out there.
Well, it's what it's all about. I mean, the writer's life. Here's the thing: a lot of people mythologize what it means to be a novelist, and they think, well, you've got to wait for the muse to hit you. They believe in writer's block, which I absolutely do not believe in. I think writer's block is a label they put on things like a misunderstanding of how process works, a misunderstanding of basic tools of the craft, and so on. And also an unfairness that we direct toward ourselves when our first draft isn't perfect, and no one in the history of writing has ever written a good first draft. First drafts suck, but that's because they're supposed to. It's just a matter of you have to have something to then polish and shape.
Right.
So I don't like the mythologizing. I really don't. And they think that if you're commercially successful, that means that you've done that at the expense of your artistic integrity, and that's a load of horseshit. That's not true. It's never been true. Yeah. And I've had people actually say, well, Vincent van Gogh was never commercially successful. He was a crazy person who shot himself. Yeah. This is not a business model. He's not a role model. He's tragic, yes, not a role model. Look at Monet. Look at Salvador Dali. Look at Charles Bukowski and William Burroughs. They were actually commercially successful while still clearly, maintaining complete touch with their artistic integrity. Right. You can do both. And in fact, by doing the business side of things well, it allows you the freedom and the lack of stress, so that cultivates your artistic side. So,
no, I like that. And I as someone who subscribes to a rosier mythology of writing life myself, and in hope more than anything, it's good to have a dose of reality every now and then. But I do like the fact that there are people like you out there who are living in Del Mar and watching the whales pass by. That's very encouraging to me. So
yeah, and it wasn't like I snap a finger. My first book made me a lot rich. I worked at it, and I continue to work at it.
Yeah, and that's the key. And I think that's the one thing that writers getting into this field they don't think about, is that they think about the book being work, but that's just the beginning of the work. Everything that happens around the book is the real work.
Yeah, actually, let me just make a statement about that too, because here are things that happen in my work week that aren't writing.
Okay.
I need to go over contracts, and even a short story contract needs to be read, because your agent doesn't handle your short story contracts. You do. Agents handle novels. So that's one thing. I need to do research for my novels. That's a ton of research. I write weird science novels. I need to do research.
Yeah.
I do speaking engagements all over the world. I need to be able to arrange those. There's a lot of back and forth that goes on, and you can do one speaking engagement and exchange 150 emails on it, trying to get it right, working out details. Travel time itself.
Yeah.
Doing interviews. I do, like, for example, the podcast. This is part of my work life, even though it's fun. book signings and book events, some of the philanthropy that goes on behind the scenes, editing. Like I'm just about to start my 26th novel, but I'm editing my 25th because I got notes back from an editor on it.
Right.
And at the same time, I have a short story due at the end of the week that I need to get my ass in gear and write. So I'm negotiating for time with an editor. Plus, I have pitches out for other projects, including new anthologies I want to edit. I'm promoting books that already came out. All of that stuff is part of my work week. It's not just me sitting there, petting my cat, staring off into the ether, wondering what mysteries my muse will unlock, and then typing for a little while.
Yeah, and the whole muse thing irritates me anyway because it's like I've heard it described as, you don't expect plumbers to walk in, see your basement flooded, and say, the muse hasn't hit me yet. I just can't work on this right now.
Yeah.
So, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, because my background, I was trained as a journalist.
Yeah.
Even though I didn't work as a newspaper guy, which is what I was trained for, I was trained as a journalist. And I just can't imagine going to an editor and saying, you know what, I know you need 4 column inches on that 5-alarm fire, but you know what, I'm not feeling it. I'm not in touch with the heart of that of the story there. I'm going to wait for a couple of weeks until that fire speaks to me.
Yeah.
You'd be working at Taco Bell.
Yeah, the next thing you wrote would be your resume.
Yeah. So, no, and it's funny, none of the writers I know who are actually on deadline, especially the novelist crowd that I mostly hang with, they don't get writer's block.
Yeah.
And I've never met a reporter who's ever gotten writer's block.
I've never had writer's block in my entire life. I didn't even understand what it was.
It's not a thing,
Yeah.
So there's that.
So, since you keep your fingers on the pulse of the industry, how do you feel about what's going on between like Amazon and the Big Four and that big kerfuffle with is it Hachette or Hachette? I never know how to pronounce that name. Hachette.
Hachette.
Yeah. What do you think of all that?
Well, it's a complicated thing.
It is.
What a lot of people don't grasp, and I have to remind myself of this too. Writing is an art. It's a conversation between you and the reader. Publishing is a business that sells copies of art.
Yeah.
It is not about art. So even if we don't like some of what's going on, some of the business decisions that Amazon or Hachette or some of the other companies might make, their business is to sell product only, not to support the industry, not to support the artists, certainly not to support even their customers, except in that if their customers buy a product, they want to be able to supply that product. It's not about art. So Amazon is doing things that some people really object to, and there are times it pisses me off too. But it's what they think is the best business model to increase their profits.
Right.
It's frustrating when it comes down to dollars and cents because we don't want art to be about dollars and cents, but it always has been.
Yeah.
I mean, the Sistine Chapel wasn't something Michelangelo did because that was his vision. It's because he was hired to do it, and a lot of what went into it was what he was asked to do.
Yeah.
So that's the realities of it. Artists for centuries painted what their patrons wanted, so that they could then paint what they wanted.
Yeah.
And with Amazon, there are things about it I don't like. I hate this thing of where you can read. The writer only gets paid by how many pages of the book you read. I hate that.
Yeah, I hate it too.
For Amazon Prime.
Yeah, I hate that too.
But I can understand their point of view with it. I just don't like it. I don't have to agree or disagree, but I don't like it.
What's your biggest objection to that? I have my own, but I'd love to hear what you.
Nonfiction research.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I've written 28 nonfiction books, and I know when I buy a nonfiction book, I might only read a chapter or two that really pertain to what I want, but I still buy the whole book.
Yeah.
So this tends to hurt a lot of nonfiction writers who genuinely, wrote good books and deserve to be paid for them, and they don't get paid as much as you might think.
Yeah.
But if somebody, like I bought a book not too long ago on a certain type on infectious diseases, but I only needed the information on smallpox for a book I'm writing. That's 3 chapters out of 26.
Right.
Now, I bought the book in hard copy. It would hurt me to think that writer didn't get paid for the other 23 chapters.
Right. That's exactly the way I feel about it. And I know authors who are, one author in particular writes, he calls them decision select novels, and they're kind of like the old choose your own adventure
Yeah,
stories.
exactly.
And how do you charge per page for that? Because you could
Exactly.
miss 2/3 of the book.
Right.
So, yeah, I think we're on the same page. Yeah, I find it all interesting, and of course, I'm watching this closely. And as an indie author, I kind of at times benefit from the conflict between Amazon and the
Sure.
big four. But I mean, what do you think is kind of the future of that? Like, how do you see that playing out?
Boy, every day I have a different opinion on this one.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I think the big four have to reorganize digital sales and also their online presence is not as sophisticated as Amazon. Amazon is changing and evolving often with the times, and they change because they are entirely internet.
Yeah.
They can adapt and change more quickly. They're more nimble,
Mm-hmm.
whereas the other companies are less nimble, but they need to improve their agility in order to stay relevant. And I do believe that will happen because otherwise they'll start fading, and nobody wants that.
Right.
Now, I say that the big four, Barnes and Noble is technically the biggest competitor to Amazon,
Yeah.
but they need, they're in some financial trouble right now. I don't know what will happen if Barnes and Noble folds, and I hope they never do because I still miss Borders, for God's sake.
Yeah, me too.
I am a brick and mortar bookstore junkie.
Yeah.
I love brick and mortar bookstores, but they have to change in order to be able to stay current and to stay viable in a world that is becoming more and more impulse buy and digital.
Yeah.
And so what that basically means is they need to create an easy to find, easy to use, cost-effective go-to digital market, and if they have them, the news that they have them is not getting out there.
Right. I kind of have this feeling that one day one of them is maybe Barnes and Noble will discover the those print-on-demand vending machines, and suddenly we'll see when you go to Barnes and Noble, you print up any digital book you want right there.
Yeah, I know a few of them tried it. Borders tried it.
Yeah.
The individual books wind up being very expensive. It's kind of like a 3D printer. It's a cool
Yeah.
idea, but the actual product is very expensive.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There may be a new technology or a new version of the technology that will emerge to make that a better idea. I'm not sure. I'm not enough of an industry forecaster on that particular topic to know how it's
Yeah.
going to be saved, but I do know it will be saved.
Yeah.
Because there is, it's very hard to have an industry that is the only game in town,
Right.
because somebody is going to want to fill that gap and step up. For a while, MySpace was the number one social media, and then somebody came out with a better version of it, which was Facebook.
Yeah.
And who knows? In maybe 10 years, there might be a better version of it than that.
Yeah.
Um,
Or MySpace may come around again. That seems to be kind of the trend.
well, actually, it's funny. It has. It's become
Yeah.
the go-to place for the music industry.
Right. Yeah.
But it's not what it was. It changed, and it found its audience, and it's actually now becoming, even a good stock.
Yeah. Which I could see that. I could see the publishing industry kind of shifting to a similar model as the music industry, where there are these sort of silos and niche audiences and that sort of thing, and it's much more possible now digitally than it was
Yeah,
in the street
yeah.
print. Do you see more sales, ebook sales or print sales?
Oh, definitely more print.
Mm-hmm.
Even though the ebook thing is here's one of the funny things about ebooks. I love ebooks. Don't get me wrong. I sell a crap ton of them. I love them. More people read the print books they buy than read the ebooks they buy.
Yeah.
So brand loyalty is driven more by print than by ebook, at least in my experience.
That's interesting.
Because people buy an ebook and they have it, but they don't necessarily read it all the way to the end all the time. A percentage do, of course. But I've had, just from paying attention to the analytics and feedback with my social media crowd, it seems that more people are reading print all the way through, and they are returning to follow the author more.
That's interesting.
And I don't know if that's across the board or if it's just with me. I haven't certainly done an in-depth study of it, other than how it affects my career. But that seems to be what I see.
That's very interesting. I'm now I'm going to look closer at those sales and see who's saying what.
Yeah.
So, what do you enjoy more? You enjoy novels or comics, or are they just sort of equally good children?
I read a bunch of stuff. Luckily I read fast, but most of what I read, like when I'm at home reading,
Mm-hmm.
tends to be either graphic novels, which I usually wait until the comics are collected into a graphic novel.
Yeah.
Um, and I have shelves upon shelves of them, and luckily a lot of them are written by friends of mine, which is kind of fun.
That's cool. Yeah.
You know, like Mike Mignola, who does Hellboy, is a good friend, and Chris Golden, who works with him on the Baltimore books, and a lot of those guys are buddies of mine, Greg Pak and Peter David. So I read their books and enjoy them, but usually what I read in prose at home are things that I'm either reading for a cover quote or stories that I'm reading for one of my anthologies.
Mm-hmm.
We just had an X-Files anthology come out 2 weeks ago, and now I'm reading stories for the next volume of that and for my next V-Wars anthology. But when I listen to stuff for entertainment, it's almost always audio.
Yeah. That's same here.
Yeah.
I listen to a lot of audio.
I listen to a ton of it. I've been a member of Audible for a long time, and
Yeah.
I also listen to my own stuff on Audible, on audio, because I write series, and you want to remember
Yes.
what happened in the last book, and the audiobook entertains me while I'm driving.
Yeah.
Or while I'm traveling, and I think if it wasn't for audiobooks, I would have been arrested for road rage quite a long time ago.
Good.
Yes.
A good call for audiobooks. Save the world.
They really have.
Well, we're up against my my window here, and I don't want to soak up any more of your time. And I really appreciate you talking to me. I am fascinated by the work you're doing, and I've been a follower of your comic work for a while. I need to start reading more of your novels.
Well, comics we're doing good with the comics. We're having fun. I'm not doing stuff with Marvel at the moment. I've been doing stuff. I did Bad Blood for Dark Horse last year, which actually won the Bram Stoker Award. Though, even though it's a writing award, I think a lot of that award had to do with the art from Tyler Crook, who was amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm off and on doing Rotten Ruin and V-Wars for IDW, and the V-Wars comic is actually they're now shopping it as a TV series.
Oh, nice. Very
Yeah,
nice.
with Tim Schlotman, who was the head writer for Dexter, writing our TV scripts. And,
Wow.
it's his pilot is incredible. Oh my God, his pilot's incredible.
I can't wait to see that.
Yeah, you'll hear more details about it in the next couple of weeks.
Very good. I will keep an eye on your site. I'm sure you'll pop something on.
Yeah, you'll hear me yell about it.
All right. Well, I'm going to wrap this up. What's that?
Thanks for having me on. This has been a good chat.
Oh no, yeah, I love talking to other writers for definitely, especially someone who's successful enough to be able to look at whales all day. That's awesome.
The whales are there. I'm not saying I'm looking at them all day. I still got 4,000 words a day.
Well, plus I got to find out you knew Richard Matheson and Ray Bradbury personally. That's the first claim I've been able to make for that sort of thing. So. That's pretty cool. All right. Well, thanks for
certainly a highlight of my life.
Yeah, no kidding. Thanks for spending the time. I'm gonna go ahead and close this out, and everyone listening, stick around for the wrapper at the end of this. Well, I'm sure I've got something really pithy and witty to say. So, thanks, Jonathan, for being on the show, man. We'll have to have you on again sometime. You can talk about V-Wars when it's out on when the premiere hits or something.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kevin.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
So that was my interview with Jonathan Maberry. I hope you enjoyed that, man. I totally enjoyed that. And, just the thought of him hanging out by, I don't know if he's in like a villa or how that's all set up, but watching the whales migrate by, that's kind of cool. Very cool, actually. And what it does, what's interesting about that? It when you talk to people like Jonathan, who are very successful in what they do. They're very successful in doing something I want to do. What it does for me is it resets my perspective, because you start thinking of some of these people as being out of reach, or unapproachable, or somehow gifted with something you don't have, just because you're not sitting there doing what they're doing at that exact moment. Just because you have not yet achieved what they've achieved. And I think it's good to talk to people who've reached that level of success, because they're normal human beings and they do normal human being stuff. And so it shows you that, because you are also a normal human being, that you can reach that level of success yourself. Does that make sense? Does any of that make sense? I feel like I rambled a little there, but I ultimately, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's great to talk to people who've done what you're trying to do, because suddenly you realize that just like them, you can achieve that as well. Does that sound more concise? So, and I like his message about, that writers should always try to help other writers. That's a philosophy I share, and that's part of why this show exists. This show isn't aimed entirely at writers. I mean, I have other audience members who do other things, but I am an author, and I do work with authors frequently. And I want to see authors succeed. I want to help them get to higher levels, and I want to help myself get to higher levels, of course. But it's great to work with people. And watch them grow. It's just fantastic. Anyway, I promised you kind of an update about the RV life, which my wife and I, we had a showing. We had an open house for our home. Everything's ready to go there. And we've had some people do second visits, second showings, which has been kind of cool. I got a guy asking a lot of questions about foundation and roof and that sort of thing. So that to me says there could be a potential offer soon. I'm hoping for a whole bunch of authors. I want to get this big bidding war going so that we can make out. But now my wife and I did a whole tour of residential travel trailers. We went to various RV sites. We've landed on doing a fifth wheel trailer. I think that's where we are. We kind of went back and forth a little about maybe doing a mobile home. But the layout and the size, that you don't get quite as much for your money. Plus, you have, now you have to tow another vehicle. There are lots of complications, and we felt like the fifth wheel trailer option was probably the best one for us. And we found a couple that are quite spacious. I mean, they're bigger than the first apartment we lived in, so that's saying something. Now, they're much, much, much smaller than the home we currently live in, but that's kind of the point, right? So we found something we like. It's kind of it got this whole split level thing going on with the living room on the front part of the trailer, where the bedroom usually is in these things. And then, you step down into a kitchen and the bedroom's in the back, and it's kind of neat. I'm looking forward to it. We're also looking at buying a truck that will pull it, because my current truck, big as it is, doesn't have the power. So I'm looking at really like a Ford F-250. That's the one that's been recommended the most. And we test drove some the other day, and they're very cool. I mean, they drive like my truck, but they have lots of nifty new features. I drive a 2011 Toyota Tundra, so a 2015 Ford F-250 has a few features that are new. We'll say. Kind of cool. Anyway, it's not about that, though, as much as it is, we are anxious to get moving. I started a contract with a client this past week that, has been it's going to be very lucrative for us. It's going to, give us a lot of padding, which will be helpful. And it's been fun because I'm working with a former coworker. So it's been a lot of fun, actually. But, I go in and I talk to them, and I do some work for them. I do some work at home, and, it's a nice and relaxed kind of work atmosphere, and I dig that. But one of the things that's happened is that there's a highlight for me that as much as I like working with the people and interacting with them, my priority really is the writing. It really is my books, and it's actually that's been fantastic to learn. I mean, I love the work I'm doing with them, but it's not the priority. They are definitely right at this moment a priority client, but they're not the priority work in my life. So there's been a shift there. I say all that to say this. I think that's the way, if you are interested in becoming an author, interested in starting a small business, building some sort of unconventional income, I think that the key to your success is going to be defining that priority and deciding up front that no matter what else you must do, no matter what you have to do just to scrape by or survive or thrive or whatever, whatever's going to come of it, your priority has to be that thing you're building. So there are going to be times when you make decisions that are going to feel counterintuitive, and some people are going to criticize. I get that. I mean, I could take on a lot more copywriting clients and creative work. I could do a lot more of that work. I could do more coaching. I could do a ton of things. But that work isn't my priority. And sometimes it pulls me away from the priority. So that's why I've been trimming down. So I've been cutting things down. So not only are we downsizing our living environment, I'm downsizing my work environment so that I have fewer clients. I'm down to the clients who I enjoy working with the most and who pay the best, pay the best rate. But I can produce better results for them. And, by reducing our overhead, our living overhead and our expenses, I can actually work with those clients and cut out the ones that I don't want to work with. So, there are some adjustments going on here. And I've really picked up on marketing my work. I'm seeing increases there. I've not yet reached the level where the books are paying for my living outright, but I'm getting much closer, much, much closer than I have in the past. So I'm still making my living on writing, which is great. But the nature of that writing is slowly shifting to what I actually want it to be. And I think a lot of that is, it comes down to making that the priority. Anyway, that's my message for the week. This RV lifestyle thing is really helping me get focused on that. It's an exciting adventure. I'm really looking forward to it. And, you're going to hear all about it. So keep tuning in. Now, next week, and I have to check the docket again. But I got more interviews coming up. And I got some interesting ones. The thing is, I've done so many. Coming up, and I don't know if this will be next week or the week following. I have to check the timing. But I'm actually interviewing Dan Wood, who is he works with Draft to Digital. So if you are an author, an indie author, you're familiar with that service. It's an aggregate service that puts your work on various platforms other than Amazon. So that's been an interesting interview. I talked with Clark Gaither, who is, he's got, I'll wait. I'll explain further. Because some of these are, they're interesting. I mean, Clark's an author as well. He wrote powerful words. And he's a physician. And he wrote powerful words, and he's got a great story, a great backstory. So I want you to hear the backstory from him, because I think, because he overcame some serious issues. And he's picked up his life and rebuilt from that. So I think you'll enjoy that. So anyway, I got those two coming up, plus some more. I interviewed an indie author named Brian Meeks, whom I think you'll really enjoy. I met him quite a while back at the Colonist Summit, and he's a card, so I think you'll enjoy talking to or hearing from him. Anyway, that's what's going on. We got some pretty good interviews coming up, so stick around. I won't soak up any more of your time. We're over an hour, so thanks for sticking around this long. Be sure you're checking it. Go sign up, by the way, at if you go to wordslingerpodcast.com or kevintumlinson.com. They both basically go to the same place these days. Go and sign up, get on the mailing list and become a slinger. Because here's what's going on. First of all, I'm starting to give away several books. You can get 2 of my best books for free just for getting on the list. So go do that now. And I'm giving away short stories and that sort of thing. Now that stuff is cool, but I'm also I'm going to start giving away some really cool technology and other things that I dig soon. And I want you to be on the list so that you find out when that's going to happen. And then you get to hear about new episodes from the podcast, new blog posts, that sort of thing, so that we're always in touch. We're always talking to each other. So anyway, that's it for this week. thanks so much for tuning in. If you've got questions, please ask them. I will answer anything. Call me at 281-809-WORD. That's 281-809-9673. Ask me anything you like. You can also email me at wordslingerpodcast.com. Follow the podcast. Go on iTunes and find the podcast. If you go into the iTunes store and you search Wordslinger Podcast, it will come up. Go rank that. Give it like 5 stars and write something really nice. That helps me more than I can tell you. Just like writing reviews for my books. Go on Amazon and write a review for anything you've read of mine. It really, really helps. So go subscribe in iTunes and check out past episodes. You can also see those on the archives at wordslingerpodcast.com. Take care, everybody, and I will see you next week.
Word Slinger.